I love machines that let me set them up for the way I sew. The way I sew and the way you sew is going to be different. And every machine can accommodate our different sewing styles. So we're going to start by going up to the settings area, what place where the little gear is. And in here you're going to notice there are both temporary settings and default settings. Anything you do temporary will be remembered while the machine is turned on. As soon as you turn it off, they're going to kind of go back to the default settings. If you want to override those default settings, look in the default sewing settings and embroidery settings area, and those will be then set for the way you want them to always be. So we're just going to touch the little arrows. Anytime you see an arrow pointing off to the side, you touch it and then it opens up that little window. If you scroll up, you'll see that those categories have just moved down a little bit. So you could even have more than one open at a time, and by touching them, they kind of collapse closed. So as we go through these, we're just going to kind of highlight. I'll give you some references of things that I might change or use at various times while I sew or embroider. So temporary sewing settings start off by talking about the deluxe stitch system. Tell you the truth, leave this on. This is the amazing tension area. It helps the thread portioning of the stitch kind of recognize how thick the fabric is. So I do leave that on all the time. Sensor presser foot lift. Now there's a time where you don't want the foot to lift when that needle is stopping down. You'll notice that when you set that particular setting, the foot will pop up just a little bit from the fabric, almost like a pivot position, and it lets the fabric kind of get loose. So there are times where I don't want that, but I want the needle to stop in my fabric. So I could actually just touch that off at that time when I want it to be changed. A lot of times I do want it to lift up, kind of relaxes my fabric, allows me to pivot when I'm doing applique. Automatic thread cutter. This will be performed at the end of buttonholes and a few other stitches throughout the machine. There is a place where you can turn this off for embroidery, so this is really focusing on the sewing part. Automatic fix. This is again the fix button light turning on automatically after you've done a thread cut. So again, if you don't want it to do those little locking stitches, which I do find some people don't like them and prefer not to have them activate, again, you can turn that off at your leisure. Stitch limiting options. When you put the straight stitch throw plate on that comes with this machine, this will automatically light up. And when we do so, you're going to notice that when we pick a zigzag, a message will come up to remind you that you have that setting on, and make sure you don't break a needle with the wrong throat plate in place. You take it off and that will automatically turn itself off. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. Another reason to turn your stitch width safety on would be if you're using a 1/4 inch foot. You'll notice that that foot does not have width, where if you accidentally stitched with a decorative stitch with that foot on, again, you'd hit the foot and break the needle. Sometimes I'll come in here and pretend that I need it only to sew a straight stitch in the center needle position, and that's one way to eliminate all needle breakage. Next, twin needle. Most of the time it's going to be off. If you put a twin needle on, which we will do, you'll find that you can then tell it what size of twin needle you're working with. This machine will take up to an 8.0 twin needle. That's like ginormous. It's like two fangs looking at you. But look at this. This is the fun part. You will find that the stitches will be simulated in a 2.0 twin needle look. So just by, this is one of my favorites, it's in the utilities section and it looks awesome with a twin needle. Now keep your eye on that. Watch what happens if you were to have a wider twin needle. We do a lot of this in our Husqvarna Viking Stitching Cosmos online course. That's one whole lesson. But you can see that stitching out your twin needle options with different sizes of twin needles will give you different stitch looks. So same stitch, different result. But I love that I can virtually touch every stitch of the machine and see what it's going to look like, even if I hop over to some of the decorative stitches. Now I'm still on the wider one, so you'll see that they're almost a little bit more parallel to each other. Not as fun as if you had that 2.0 twin needle on. That's the one you get the most bang for your buck when you start to work. Look at that. Work with a twin needle. Love, love this. And when we talk about stitching out your stitch book, we talk about going back and actually redoing or restitching all the stitches with a twin needle. So pretty fun to actually just go see what your machine is capable of doing. Okay, turn that off. So stop playing with that. That's a fun one though. Feed teeth options. It will automatically, when selected, be lowered like when you sew on a button or when you go over to the embroidery area or when you switch on free motion quilting. So a lot of times I just say leave that off or on for auto, and it will do the rest for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and reach over to our temporary embroidery settings. Again, leave that deluxe stitch system on. It really makes a difference. Depending on which embroidery foot you're using, the sensor Q foot is what comes with it. So I feel like that is the better foot, but for any reason you are using the R foot that came with it, you'll switch that over to floating, and then you'll have the ability to make it higher or lower, above or closer to your fabric, depending on what you're doing. But if you use the sensor Q foot, that's the best one, and it can go over a lot thicker areas without you having even know anything about that. So recommend that foot all the time. Thread cut options. Remember, we're in the embroidery area right now. So automatic thread cut and jump stitch trim, that is trimming all those stitches between every jump, which is good most of the time. A lot of times I will turn that off when I'm stitching lots of lettering because it wants to, if I'm stitching out the word Viking, it's going to cut and trim the thread between the V, the I, the K, every letter. And on the back side, it will start to look a little bit messy. So a lot of times when I'm doing lettering, I will turn it off if I am going to see the back side of my project, like a tea towel. Trust me, first time you do that, you might remember me talking about that, and it will make a difference. Okay, yes, you can use twin needle in the embroidery area. Make sure the straight stitch throat plate is not attached. Obviously, it will sense that and know that you're doing it wrong and tell you. All right, default sewing settings. So we're talking about what we can override and it just remember all the time. So some of these we talked about that it will automatically do, but again, you can turn them off. Free motion quilting, not something I'm going to leave on all the time, just select when I'm doing it, but we are in that segment. That means that once you put the free motion quilting foot on, you turn your machine off at the end of the day, you turn it back on, it will remind you you are set for free motion because that's a remembered setting. So until you're done, you can leave it on and then come in here and then turn it off. Let's peek in the embroidery options here. Again, this is where the thread cut options are. Again, sometimes I just want to turn it off quickly for the one project. Sometimes I want to leave it off for multiple days. So you can come in here and turn it off. Changing the pivot height of that foot. So again, if you're working on something a lot heavier, higher loft, you can bring that foot to be a little bit higher than normal. Best part here, my hoops. My hoop list means that you can come in and actually check off the hoops that you own. And then when you're embroidering, the machine only picks hoops that are in your collection. Like for example, 360 by 260 comes with this machine. 260 by 200 comes with this machine. And down at the lower part, a 120 by 120. By checking those off, then it can only pick those 3 hoops. And look at all the hoops, and that's why you get to pick them. Because Viking makes so many hoop sizes, it's nice to have that. But you don't want the machine always picking a hoop you don't have just because that's the one that fits that design. You want to be able to control what it picks. This would be where you set it. The only thing you have to remember is, let's say tomorrow you go to the store, you buy a new hoop, you have to come in here, tell the machine that you bought the 200 by 200 hoop, and then it will allow you to use that hoop. You put that hoop on, you don't have that on the list, it'll say please attach correct hoop, and you'll be like, what's wrong? It's my hoop. And you have to come to the hoop list and actually activate it. So I'm actually going to turn this off. I'm not going to leave these on so we can reference these at a later time, but that will let us be. All right, machine settings. Again, these are things that you can change, such as language. I've actually already adjusted the volume. So right now, if you actually, oh, don't change the language if you don't want. When you touch something, you're going to hear the machine beep a little bit. I have actually turned that off so you don't hear me touching the screen and hearing that click over and over and over. So whatever works best for you. Auto repeat means that any warning sign that comes up, it will pop up and repeat that little audio message with a little ding to remind you that that is a problem and come back to the machine and fix me. Machine nickname, you can name your machine. So whatever you want to call it here, you could say good morning, let's sew. You could put whatever you want. That'll be on your opening screen for your name. Color theme. So this machine was made in 4 different colors. You can actually change, watch the background here as I change it from vivid sunset, modern mint, and indigo ice. It's actually some really pretty colors, but you can see which one is your favorite for today. I will leave it back on the original burgundy blush, which is this machine's colorway. Lock screen, you can touch that, make the screen not touchable, and be able to, kind of like putting it to sleep. Different lights, if you watch the lights right here, you'll find that they will change and highlight a little yellower or brighter, cooler colors. Units in inches or millimeters. I am a fan of millimeters. This is the only time I use millimeters is when I sew. A lot of people switch that to inches for embroidery, but that looks really weird when you get to your sewing side and you're looking at 0.197 for stitch length, and you're like, what in the world is that? That doesn't help you one bit. So in the sewing world, I am a fan of millimeters. But you could toggle between that as you go from like embroidery, and it's a little easier to see 3 inches in the embroidery world versus, 100 millimeters, which is 4 inches, I know, but close enough. All right, showing your clock, you can set your time zone. Different clock options. You can even have your clock on the top bar if you want. And then if you need to reset, this is a great way to track how long a sewing project or embroidery project takes. So once you reset this, it's just kind of like a trip meter. So it'll kind of tell you how long you've actually been working on that. Okay, getting down here, Wi-Fi settings. This is your Wi-Fi networks in your area. Mine is network, so I'm hooked up to that right now. That's going to be for doing any updates as they become available. Make sure you have a MySewNet settings account, and you can register your new account. You can also do that at your computer at mysewnet.com. All right, last one, just is the machine information, your serial number, which is on the bottom of this machine, but super easy to look for that number if you need it right here in the machine information area. Clear all. If you've done stuff to this machine, you want to just kind of start over, that's the button to push. It won't clear out anything that you shouldn't clear out. It'll just kind of put it all back to how it came from the factory. Okay, when you're wanting to get out of here, touch that blue gear button and you're right back to the last stitch you were playing with.